Louisiana Eats is brought to you with major support from Zatarain's, a New Orleans tradition since 1889. From WWNO New Orleans and our studios in the Southern Food and Beverage Museum, this is Louisiana Eats. I'm Poppy Tooker. Since 1986, Cakebread Cellars in Napa Valley has gathered a small group of chefs, journalists, and food enthusiasts for an intensive 4-day seminar at the American Harvest Workshop. Recently, the Louisiana Eats team was invited to participate, allowing us to share this incredible experience. On this week's show, we harvest Chardonnay grapes in the vineyard, take a wine tasting class with Professor Michael Weiss, and create culinary magic with Chef David Slater of Emeril's flagship restaurant. We're taking off to sunny California on this week's Louisiana Eats. We'd been on the bus for about an hour when it pulled into Canaris, California on an overcast Monday morning. The members of the American Harvest Workshop filed out and went searching for coffee and breakfast, quietly eating pastries as they waited for their guide, Toby Halkovich, Director of Vineyard Operations at Cakebread Cellars. The sun was barely up, but it was the end of Toby's day. He'd supervised the overnight grape harvest and was looking a little weary.
We started picking here about 1 o'clock this morning. We night pick for several different reasons. This time of year, it's not unusual for the daytime temperatures to be in the 90s, 100 degrees. So the working conditions at night are much better. It's much cooler, usually 55, 60 degrees. So better conditions. The other thing is you saw our truck left a little while ago. Nice thing about that is we can have all this fruit into the winery before it heats up. And so less oxidation. Better fruit for better wine. And the other thing is also it's more efficient. If we can get the fruit up to the winery and they can start loading the presses 6, 7 in the morning versus 10, 11, we can get more fruit in through the day, which gives us more flexibility. It's just a win for everybody. So those are a lot of the reasons why we pick at night.
You need your jacket on.
Toby's job requires a lot of skill sets. He's part farmer, part geologist, and even a pretty good weatherman.
Directly west of us is the Petaluma Gap. It's a low point in the coastal range, and it's actually a straight shot right out to the Pacific Ocean. So that fog kind of it pours right in through here. The fog does get all the way up the valley, which is part of what makes Napa Valley what it is. We get the foggy, cool nights. As it recedes, this is going to be the last area that fog recedes from. And so we're going to stay cooler here. It's usually 5, 10 degrees lower peak temperature during the summer down here versus, say, Calistoga. And so it's perfect for growing Chardonnay.
Guiding us around the vineyard, however, wasn't the only thing Toby had in mind that morning.
We're going to make a little competition out of picking the grapes. We're going to see how quickly we can get through a ton of Chardonnay. So we do this every year. Usually do Pinot. Pinot clusters are much smaller, so these guys get a little bit of a break, and that the Chardonnay picks much quicker. But we'll see. Usually it's always fun to try to put them up against our full-time crew so they can see how quickly it really goes. Because I expect 45 minutes to get this ton with, about 30 people here. Typically 8 guys will pick a ton in about a half an hour. So they'll move pretty quick.
As we walked through the vineyard, the big green clusters of Chardonnay grapes were impossible to resist. But not all of the grapes were green. Some shriveled dark grapes lay scattered on the ground. Toby explained they were infected with botrytis.
Botrytis is also known as bunch rot. It's a fungus. It lives on live tissue, so usually if a berry breaks, the juice will start to rot, but also any free moisture. So it does kind of give it a purple appearance.
Well, how do you tell if purple grapes have botrytis?
Well, that's the nice thing is typically it's gray when it's active, so you can see it. But most red varietals are not susceptible to it because they have thicker skin. It's primarily the white varietal, and then the other thing is mostly red varietal. We grow in warmer portions of the valley, less free moisture, less of a problem.
It's incredible how temperamental grapes are. The climate, the soil, the water, they all determine whether a specific grape will thrive or not.
So in 17 miles, we can grow really any varietal of grape there is, and we can do it very well. When you look at France, you have to grow your whites, your Pinot and Burgundy. In Bordeaux, you see your Cabernet and your Merlot. So you've got several hundred miles apart. Here we can do it within 15 miles. And actually, it's not uncommon to see one vineyard and have both Chardonnay and Cabernet on the same vineyard. We're pretty blessed in that regard.
A green tractor with 3 empty bins was waiting at the end of the aisle. That was our task for the morning, to harvest enough grapes to fill those bins.
I'm going to pass out the knives. Let's grab one and pass it along.
After speaking with the tractor's driver, Toby produced a basket of knives with scary curved blades.
Remember, don't bring this on the plane as a carry-on.
Since most of us had never done this before, Toby explained we should be looking for the rachis, the small intersection between the vine and stem of a grape cluster.
What you want to do is you want to cut the rachis kind of right where it's still green. The best way to cut is to get the knife behind the rachis and then roll it towards you. Just like that. It's kind of a circular motion. You don't want to just get in there and yank back, okay?
Okay. What I want you to do is I want you to count off 1, 2. Okay, so 1, 2.
As the sun started to come out, we broke up into 2 teams and got one last safety talk from Toby.
So the big things though, 1 person per vine. Everybody should be working from the east side of the vine or the open side of the vine. Always know where your hand is. Always know where your buddy's hands are. Is everybody ready?
Yes.
All right. We did give you orange gloves, so if there is an accident,
you'll see the blood come through the glove.
No, but if the finger does get detached, it's much easier to see with an orange glove on.
Okay, ones over here.
All right, ones.
I never figured out if Toby was joking or not, but maybe that was for the best. Later, I asked him about using trimming shears instead, but Toby said they're actually more dangerous. I believed Toby, but I knew the minute I had that blade in my hand, this was not going to be easy. I'm not getting it, man. This is really hard. It's hard and it's frightening because of this curved blade. I keep distinctly having this sensation I'm going to stab myself in the chest. I've never been so tentative with a knife. I'm usually really comfortable with knives, but this is frightening to me. In fact, the only person who looked comfortable was Boston chef Daniel Bruce, who had done this before.
It's not my first pick.
He and teammate Lisa M. quickly got into a groove.
I'm cherry picking. It's called cherry picking, so you pick the best clusters.
That's right.
I think you're ready to go. What do you think?
Yep.
Back.
My second knife! Look at this. Here, will you take that knife away from me?
Oh, okay, good. Look at this. 3 buckets to a few clusters over there.
No leaves? Great.
As the large bins began to fill up, it became clear that Team 1 had an unfair advantage. 20 minutes later, I was still having a hard time. I mean, the grapes are gorgeous. It's really hard to do. I am not going to give up my radio career for grape picking.
Let's bring them in.
Look at this, Michael. Freaking, we're almost there.
Team 2.
Within a half hour, both bins were full. Our crew of 30 had done well, but nobody was going to be hired on for the grape harvest.
This group, they did great compared to most groups. Number one, everybody was safe. Everybody came out with all their fingers. We didn't lose anybody in terms of nobody's out wandering around the vineyard at this point. I think we've got everyone accounted for. In terms of volume, they did great, right in there.
We took a group picture, happily returned our knives, and that ended our careers as grape harvesters. I'm Poppy Tooker. And this is Louisiana Eats.
Keeps bringing you home to California, where the warm sun shines. California.
After the grape harvest, Michael Weiss, the American Harvest Workshop's official wine educator, gave us a crash course in wine appreciation. In addition to being the former sommelier at Arnaud's restaurant in New Orleans, Michael's been teaching wine studies at the Culinary Institute of America for 27 years. So get out those notepads, because here comes Michael's master class.
It's very challenging to put wine in a perspective that young people will understand that it's not just something to get drunk with, but it is part of culture, it is food, and it can enhance the flavor of food. Something that is light-bodied would be like water. Medium body would be like bark soda. Full body would be like a pistachio milkshake, perhaps. Or you could say skim milk, 1%, 2% milk, cream, heavy cream. Body is not about taste, it's about texture. And it becomes an important part in giving a mouthfeel to a wine, you know? You'll know that a white wine with that gold color, probably some oak treatment, but just to make sure where you're going to sense that on the roof of your mouth, you'll hear people sort of doing that, clucking their tongue because it dries out the roof of your mouth, those wood tannins. Whereas red wines are even more challenging to beginners because they have not only the tannins and the body coming from the oak barrel, they also have it from skin contact. So you're going to feel that between your lips and your gums and your teeth. It's going to really dry out your mouth. Here's some clues in terms of how to approach wine and understand it and not be intimidated, because we don't worry about if we're buying 2% milk or if we're buying whole milk, assessing it and swirling it and sniffing it. And sometimes people are a little bit, shy about expressing their opinions. So with white wines, when you see a white wine, you tilt the glass. It's good to hold it against a white background, like a sheet of paper or a napkin. And if the color is straw or fairly light, and you see a green tinge in the color, that indicates that white wine came from a cool growing region. It's probably going to be lower in alcohol, higher in acidity, and light in body. Whereas if you see a white wine that's sort of a banana yellow or a light gold with some brass highlights, that's probably a white wine that's a little bit older or seen some oak treatment, because it was breathing in the oak barrel, and that allowed it to gain some color. If the wine is, even darker than that, there's a chance maybe that white wine is too old. It shouldn't be browning unless it's a Madeira, where they're doing that on purpose, or a Vinsanto. So color can give the first clue for white wines. Rosés are really wonderful with New Orleans food. There's a lot of situations, and also with the warm climate, where rosés can really be wonderful. And they're usually made by just taking the grapes and having a shorter period of skin contact than you would with a normal red wine. And not all rosés are sweet, like white Zinfandel. There's lots of rosés that are bone dry, and again are quite useful in many, many wine food situations. So again, the darker the color there, usually there's a little bit more full in body. And how could you tell that looking at a red wine? So if you had a grape type, such as Pinot Noir or Gamay with a thin skin, you hold that against your white napkin or your white piece of paper, and you're going to see a sort of cranapple, cranberry, red cherry color. And that indicates a wine that's not too heavy on the palate. If you see an opaque, deep purple or garnet, that's probably one of the thicker skinned grapes like Cabernet Sauvignon or Syrah, Shiraz, same grape. So we can tell a lot by the heft or the weight of the wine simply by the color. And if a wine is older, then it will be, instead of one color, monochromatic, it'll be polychromatic. And you'll see that the older wines will have sort of a ring of onion skin on the rim and a deeper, darker red color in the middle. Smell. We can only really taste salt, sour, sweet, bitter, and something they call umami, the Asians do. So a lot of what we call taste is really flavors, and we can first discern them in smelling. Young wines have primary aromas. If I'm smelling perhaps like Cabernet Sauvignon, one of the most planted black grape in the world, I'm expecting that I'm going to get black fruit flavor, specifically one from California or Australia, New World, maybe cassis or black currant. You'll get a little bit of that in the French version, but also with maybe a little bit more earthiness or black olives or Kalamata olives, maybe some mushrooms, So we have an idea in advance of things that have typical smells and typical flavors and typical weight. Aroma is that primary smell of the grape, like the berries in Zinfandel or the cassis in Cabernet Sauvignon. And bouquet comes after the wine ages, either in barrels or bottles or both. So you really, if you're in the know, you wouldn't want to say, oh, this 2013 Cabernet Sauvignon has a lovely bouquet. You might refer to it as aroma, and after it ages a while, it would be bouquet. So now we're ready to put the wine in our mouth. And when we put our wine in our mouth, it's like listening to, a great song, whether it be by the Neville Brothers or Dr. John or any other, Paco de Lucia or any other great musician, should grab you right away. And then, you're listening to as a song develops, and maybe you're humming that song after you finish listening to it. And good wine should be like that too. Sometimes that color and the aroma seems to be very promising, but it just falls short on the palate. There's no persistence. So what we want from a wine, whether it be champagne, white, rosé, or red, is we want that immediate attraction, we want that middle palate, and we want some aftertaste, that persistence, which is known as the finish. So now we've put the wine in our mouth, we sense sweetness at the tip of our tongue. Think about how people lick an ice cream cone. We sense sour underneath our tongue. As I mentioned earlier, the wood tannins would be on the roof of your mouth, skin tannins on your gums. So we can taste all over our mouths, but those are some things to remember. Again, how do I know the wine's high acid? Do I have to read a book? No, you'll feel that you're wet underneath your tongue. How I know the wine's full-bodied? Oh, the skin tannins are on the gums and the wood tannins are on the roof of my mouth. So after tasting this wine, again, think about the aftertaste. Is it pleasant? How long does it last? A lot of my students confuse the fact that it's very alcoholic or tannic with being a long finish. They're not necessarily connected. So some of my favorite wines in the world are light-bodied Blanc de Blanc champagnes. They may be light in body, but you feel that generous, attack, middle palate, and that aftertaste. That's a hallmark of fine wine.
That's Michael Weiss, official wine educator for the American Harvest Workshop and professor of wine studies at the Culinary Institute of America. For more tips about selecting and consuming wine with confidence, check out his book, Wine Wise, or listen to this segment again on itsneworleans.com. What is crudo? Stay tuned, and we'll answer that question when we come right back. I'm Poppy Tooker, and you're listening to Louisiana Eats, edible content for Louisiana food lovers. Louisiana Eats is brought to you with major support from Popeye's Louisiana Kitchen and Zatarain's.
So won't you carry me back to California? I've been on the road too long.
Here's this week's culinary quiz question, brought to you with support from Popeye's Louisiana Culinary Institute. What is crudo? Crudo means raw in both Italian and Spanish. Crudo is a raw fish preparation that's very different from sushi, but if you're a sushi lover, it's a good guess you're going to love crudo too. To make crudo, fresh raw fish is sliced thinly against the grain and then drizzled with oil, acid, and seasonings. Crudo originated in fishing towns along the coast of Italy, Sicily, and Sardinia. Each village has their own signature fish or flavoring preference, but usually extra virgin olive oil, lemon juice, and salt are used. I'm Poppy Tooker, and you're listening to Louisiana Eats.
Okay, Chef, whenever you're ready, we're ready.
Chef Josh Thompson is under pressure. He's surrounded by a room full of cooks awaiting his command as he puts the final touches on a tuna crudo that he's been working on for hours.
Try not to drip, because that means we gotta wipe everything.
Every available surface in the kitchen is covered with plates, ready for service. Josh instructs a serpentine line of cooks to perfect each crudo presentation with a bean salad dressing.
Grab the beans from the bottom.
Outside the kitchen, 72 hungry guests await Josh's dish, the first course of an elaborate meal that will last all night.
Okay, let's rock and roll.
Getting this tuna crudo plated took days of preparation. Earlier that week, the 5 chefs who prepared the meal brainstormed with Cakebread Cellars culinary director, Brian Streeter.
This is going to be a 6-course meal at the table, and then probably 3 past appetizers beforehand, so your portions can be small. Don't think of them as real big. We want people to leave having had a really nice time, but not feel overwhelmed.
Each chef was expected to pair a specialty ingredient with a bottle of wine selected by the Cakebreads.
We're going to be ready to go at 6 for past apps, and we'll give you the heads up. And then at 6:30, they're sitting down.
Each chef could cook whatever they wanted as long as they obeyed 3 rules: cook local, cook seasonal, and cook to the wine.
All right. You see how nice it is out here? That's why I'm out here. You know?
For professionals like Daniel Bruce, this wasn't as challenging as it sounds. He wrapped antelope in charcuterie, then served it with potatoes and a chocolate dipping sauce.
The technique I use for the antelope is similar to a technique I use in the restaurant for venison. The rest is completely designed for that particular bottle of cab that I drank last night. And just after I tasted that wine, I decided based on the flavor profile what ingredients would make sense and how I could heighten the flavors of that wine and pay homage to such a beautiful wine.
Daniel was the last to serve that night, so he continued to chop potatoes calmly beneath shady trees. Inside the kitchen, his companions didn't have the luxury of time on their side.
I'm just really busy right now. I'd rather not talk.
In every nook and cranny of the crowded kitchen, the cooks peeled vegetables, gutted rabbits, and scored duck breasts.
Dude, I'm telling you, that's a big-ass rabbit over there.
The goal is to get the loins off the rabbit, and then we're going to wrap it in some pancetta to keep the moisture in. With it being a wild animal, they tend to dry out a little, so it's going to help to keep the moisture in by wrapping it out.
Chef Peter Chastain would even make use of the rabbit's livers as an appetizer that night.
You see, rabbits are kind of multi-personalitied. The legs and the hoppers really have to be braised, whereas the loin is kind of a roaster. If you're to roast the leg and the hopper, they're too tough. They don't really cook out well. So we separate them and create separate uses.
Meanwhile, Chef David Slater was utilizing vegetables from the Cakebread's garden to make a colorful, crisp salad.
Right now I'm julienning green tomato, really, really fine, because it's going to be mixed with zucchini and squash and everything, so it's going to be a nice little acidic crunch in the salad. And the acid is going to go really nicely with everything else in the dish. It's going to really complement the wine.
When sipped with Sauvignon Blanc, It was a big hit.
Nice and fresh, and I think it'll be a nice little palate cleanser before they eat all those rich things.
That's where Chef Kent Rathburn entered into the evening.
Follow me with the duckies.
Follow me with the duckies.
Away from the madness of the kitchen, Kent had an opportunity to instruct his crew about grilling ducks over a wood fire.
You want the fat really nice and crisp. So what we're going to do is we're going to render it, and then as soon as they start flaming up a little bit, we're going to move them to the front where they're farther away from the fire and let them slow cook. This is the same one with chicken and anything that's got a lot of fat in it, chicken, turkey, quail, any of that kind of bird fat, it'll start burning fast.
The smoke from the flames blackened as the fat rendered out and dropped into the fire.
Always remember when you're building a wood fire, have a safe zone.
Have a safe zone.
Have a safe zone, man. For sure.
The duck's skin bubbled as they cooked to medium rare. Before dinner was served, Kent's crew transferred them to a 500-degree oven for a final searing. As the clock ticked away, the waitstaff rehearsed how to present the past hors d'oeuvres.
Okay, sure. Fatted calf.
Okay, so I have black mission figs with Point Reyes blue cheese and fatted calf guanciale with walnut oil.
Rocked it.
Got it.
The guests arrived and plating began.
You were just on a chicken. Hey, ready for one of the day. One vegan, one veg.
The chefs made it look like another day at work, but that harvest dinner epitomized the modern values of American cooking.
Thanks for the help, everybody.
In the life of great chefs, learning never stops. David Slater, executive chef of Emeril's restaurant in New Orleans, had never been to Napa Valley before he arrived at the American Harvest Workshop. David was not only challenged to prepare an entree, but also volunteered to make appetizers for the guests. He was short on time and cooking space in the small, crowded kitchen, but he had access to some incredible ingredients. David looked at what was available and thought about 2 dishes from Emeril's restaurant that he'd never paired together before and decided to test his curiosity. The result? Delicious.
One thing we started doing a few years back was using the leftover duck wings to serve as a dish, because back then, the only thing you used duck wings for were stock. And as a chef, you want to, you need to find a use for everything. You want to use every single part of the animal and waste nothing. So I think it was Sandy Sharp at the time. He's like, hey, can you use these duck wings for anything? I'm like, yeah, bring us the duck wings and we'll try to find a use for them. So what we do is we confit them like we would duck legs. We season them with salt and we let them sit for a while, and then we just confit them in duck fat. So we preserve them that way. And we tried a few things, we went trial and error, and we tried grilling them, we tried frying them, we tried battering them, all kinds of things. And the way that works best right out of the confit oil is right into some cornstarch and right into the fryer. That fat renders a little bit more, they get nice and crispy, and then we toss them in this sticky, spicy, sweet chili glaze that we make at the restaurant with palm vinegar. It's kind of like a sweet and sour sauce, if you will, with a little more flavor. And I kind of wanted to serve them like buffalo chicken wings, so it was kind of an Asian version of buffalo. And I served them on a shaved celery and grape salad with some creme fraiche that we whip with blue cheese. So it kind of is like, it's not the carrots and celery, it's grapes and celery that goes really well with the glaze. And the grapes go really well with the celery and with the blue cheese as well. And you just dip these sticky wings into the blue cheese creme fraiche, and it is incredible.
When you were at Cakebread, though, there were all these time constraints. There were too many cooks in the kitchen.
I almost didn't make it out with those duck wings. We were literally, if I didn't have another 10 minutes, they would have been too tough.
Did you have to cook them in a confit style ahead of time? You had the time to do that?
I made sure I had time to do that, and that was my first priority, because the appetizers, those are things that we volunteered to do. Those aren't things that we had to do. I knew somebody was using duck, And I was like, hey, you got any duck wings? And they're like, of course we have duck wings. So I made little drumsticks, and I confit them as quickly as possible because they only had 3 hours to cook. And if you confit them, they cook probably about 2.5 hours. I sped up the process a little bit by putting them in the wood oven and cooking them at a little hotter temperature. And then when it started getting a little too hot, I took them out and put them back in the oven. Just in the nick of time, they were ready. The honey in Napa was incredible, so I wanted to use that. I love Bagna Cauda. I love, the flavors. I love the melding of the garlic and the anchovy and the chili and the lemon and the herbs. It's an Italian dip for raw vegetables or whatever you want to dip in there. So at the restaurant, we do a Bagna Cauda compound butter. So I was like, well, I'm going to make that with a little bit of local honey and chop up a bunch of local herbs and throw them in. And then I'm going to cook the duck wings after they're confit in the wood-burning oven to get nice and crispy, and then toss them in a bowl with that Bagna Cauda honey butter. And that's how I serve them. So I did bring this duck wing recipe back with me. It's not on the menu as of yet. We had a kitchen table last night that got to enjoy it with some local Lower Ninth Ward honey that this girl, Uznia, that works at Bacchanal, and I'll give her a shout out right now, that she farms in her backyard, and she actually has a beehive and farms the honey, and we were lucky enough to get some. So I've been adding some of that honey to our Bagna Cauda butter duck wings, and they are incredible. We had some razor clams last week, and I did that same Bagna Cauda honey butter with the razor clams, and it was just phenomenal. There were so many inspirations there, and it's just, I just find myself wanting to use the freshest, best ingredients possible. That's what California gave me. Closest to the source, the best quality you can possibly find. And, we're lucky at Emerils that we're able to use those products and we're able to buy them. And, we're lucky to be able to cook them, and our guests are lucky to be able to eat them.
That's Lucky David Slater, executive chef at Emeril's flagship restaurant in New Orleans. For your reservation or to see if David's added the duck legs and Bagna Cauda to the restaurant's menu, visit emerils.com. Bagna Cauda literally translates as hot bath. Traditionally, it's used as a fondue dipping sauce for raw vegetables in the Piedmontese region of Italy. But in the hands of David Slater, it transforms into something beyond tradition. David's take on Bagna Cauda is really just a version of compound butter, easy to make and something that you can keep stashed in your freezer to use anytime the mood strikes. All you have to do is combine 1 pound of softened butter with fresh chopped parsley, capers, garlic, and the zest of a lemon. Then add a small amount of chopped anchovies. But don't be afraid, anchovy haters. They're only there to add essential saltiness, and you won't taste anchovy at all. Take my word, it won't be the same if you leave them out. A little extra virgin olive oil and honey round things out. Then the Bagna Cauda is seasoned with salt, freshly cracked black pepper, and some chili flakes. Keep it in the refrigerator or form the compound butter into a roll. Wrap it in plastic and store it in your freezer so you can slice a few tablespoons off at a time. Whether you've got duck legs, chicken wings, or veggies on the grill, this sauce is going to rock the crowd. Just add a few tablespoons of the room temperature Bagna Cauda to a deep bowl and add the hot food right off the grill. Toss them together until everything is well coated and your dish is literally dripping with buttery goodness. You'll find David Slater's complete recipe on our website at itsneworleans.com. I'm Poppy Tooker, and Chef David Slater's Bagna Cauda makes for some good Louisiana eats. Chris J. is an inspired food blogger for the Shreveport-Bossier Convention and Tourist Bureau. Chris is also our Louisiana Eats roving reporter. And Chris, you're back. what are we going to do today?
We're going to go to Rhino Coffee in Shreveport's South Highlands neighborhood. This is a relatively new coffee house that's in a beautiful, beautifully renovated 2-story historical home in the South Highlands neighborhood. And it's just such a cool atmosphere. And they serve wonderful food as well.
Yum. So what do you eat when you go there?
Well, I would definitely recommend, and I know this is not what you're expecting from a coffee house, but they have a chef there named Pat Bowling who is creating basically stews and soups that are really world class. Pat's sort of this like beatific guru type. You know, he's always in the back cooking up something. He'll come out, he'll give you a little taste. He'll put his arm around you, see how your day was. He's the same way with his customers and his staff. Everyone kind of breaks into a smile when they see Pat come out of the kitchen with something for him to taste or a joke about some guy that just left. He's a part of why I love Rhino so much. He is the fabric of the place. He's always talking about food as a part of his upbringing. And I think that that's the kind of food he's trying to put in front of his customers at Rhino. The beef stew marsala is absolutely fantastic. Chunks of beef, new potatoes, baby portobellos, celery, garlic. It just tastes like you're scooping out a garden with your spoon. It's really, really wonderful.
That's delicious. And what kind of soups do you enjoy?
You know, this is going to kind of speak to the comfort food junkie in me, but their chicken pot pie is fantastic, which is topped with a biscuit that's sort of cooked on top of the pot pie. The place has a romance to it. You feel like the wheels are sort of about to fall off, like the inmates have been allowed to run the asylum. It's all these like really attractive, sexy young hippies that are in the back concocting a vegan pizza that's going to be ready in 20 minutes. And, you know, you just shouldn't go in there with a plan. You should go in and just say, what the heck are y'all working on in the back? Because these creative, young, fun people are always cooking up something.
That is fascinating. So there's a pretty big vegan emphasis there, too.
Vegan and vegetarian. They realize that they're catering to an audience that hasn't really been catered to extensively in Shreveport-Bossier. And there's just like sort of a vibe there that they're going to do things differently than they've been done before.
What's the coffee like? Because, you know, if it's a coffee house, they must have some sort of trademark.
They do, absolutely. And I think their trademark is they care about the coffee they're roasting. They're making sure that it's fair trade. If you ask a barista about the coffee of the day, he's going to tell you where it came from, when it was picked, the name of the plantation or farm that it came from, and the origin, the terroir. I mean, they know this stuff. And that's why I feel close to Rhino Coffee, because you get the feeling that they're doing like something that's about ethics and it's about philosophy, and it's not just about putting a product out as quickly and as cheaply as possible.
That's a rare thing in today's world,
Absolutely,
isn't it?
Especially in northern Louisiana, where coffee house culture really has been few and far between.
Charming. Every time we talk to you, Chris, I want to get behind the wheel and just drive north.
I appreciate it. I'd love to see you up there. I'll take you out to Rhino Coffee.
Chris J., our Louisiana Eats roving reporter. When we come back from a short break, we'll speak with Dolores Cakebread, co-founder of Cakebread Cellars. Stay tuned. I'm Poppy Tooker, and you're listening to Louisiana Eats, edible content for Louisiana food lovers. Louisiana Eats is made possible with major support from Rouse's Markets. The American Harvest Workshop wouldn't exist without Jack and Dolores Cakebread, founders of Cakebread Cellars. They've been in the wine industry since 1973 and played a pivotal role connecting Napa Valley's farmers and purveyors to chefs in the region and across the country. But they weren't always at the epicenter of America's most famous wine region. Before they founded the winery, the family operated another business, Cakebread's Garage in Oakland, California. On the final day of the workshop, Dolores reflected on her life as a leader in Napa Valley.
Cakebread's Garage was a family business. Jack's father had started it, and when we came home from the service, his father had a heart attack. So Jack had to work at the shop, which is not what we really planned to do with our life. So we both worked at the shop and built it up to a really good business. We had wonderful employees. We had 11 employees down there. And it kept us really busy. But then when we started the vineyard, Jack said, Dolores, you don't have anything to do, so you could go up and run the vineyard and I'll run the garage. So I came up here for about a month, and the workers would not work for me. Finally, I was really frustrated, so I went home and told Jack, and he said, Dolores, you're being ridiculous. I said, okay, you go up and run the vineyards, and I'll work at the garage. So Jack said, oh, okay, so I'll come up and do it. They wouldn't work for him either because he was a white gringo man from the city. And so finally we hired a manager, and he was from the valley. And so they were very happy working for him. So that took care of that. And pretty soon it turned out I was running the garage and he was just up here. So, life changed every day.
I would like to know how you and Jack even became interested in drinking wine in the first place.
Well, back in 1966, we were invited to the Berkeley Society's wine tasting. Now, Jack and I had never been to a wine tasting, so we just went. And we got to this house in San Francisco, and everyone was carrying their case with 8 glasses in it. We looked at each other and said, oh dear, I think we blew it. So we went in there. The hostess gave us 8 glasses each. Now, we weren't really big wine drinkers then because California had not come on board, and so it was just French wine. And they went around the table and asked each one, which did you like best? And Jack said, well, I like this one. And the name was Bechavel, but he called it Belchabelly. They thought, oh my goodness, I could have crawled under the table. Anyhow, that was our introduction to French wine. Then later, in 1973, the wine industry was just starting in Napa Valley, and we were able to buy this piece of land only because we thought it would be wonderful to bring our family up on holidays to enjoy the countryside. But as we got to looking around and we thought, maybe we should be something more, we talked to the neighbors like Robert Mondavi and Andrei Chalachev, and they all said, oh, you should plant Cabernet. Now, Robert Mondavi said, no, you should plant Sauvignon Blanc because Sauvignon Blanc is a cash flow wine. You can put it out in 1 year, whereas Cabernet takes 5 years to age. So we got to thinking, and we planted a little of both. So we had cash flow and we had aging wine. Then we got all our friends together and had a bottling party. They helped us bottle our first 57 cases of Sauvignon Blanc, and that was so much fun. So we bottled the 57 cases, and Philip from Grotzinger Wine Company in Yountville came up to taste our wine to see if he'd like to sell it. He really liked it. He said, I'll take it all. And I said, well, you can't take it all because it's like selling your children. So we only gave him part of it. And then the rest I took in 10-case lots in my station wagon and went to Jackson Wine Company in Berkeley. When I got there was a beer truck in front of me. Here was a gal in jeans and tennies unloading these cakes of beer. And I thought, wow, that's not really what I planned. But anyhow, I went into the store and said, hi, I'm Dolores Cakebread. I have some wine for you. Well, they'd never heard of me or heard of the wine. So the guy said, put it over in the corner. I said, do you have a cart or something I could use? You didn't bring your own cart? No. Anyhow, he lent me a cart. I put it in the corner and got in the car and thought, oh, this is never going to happen to me again. So after that, I wore a flippy skirt and high heels. So they would say, oh, Mrs. Cakebread, can I help you? And I'd say, oh, of course you can help me. I love that. Thank you so much. So ever after that, they unloaded my car for me and put the cases in the corner themselves.
Yeah, I understand that your relationship with Jack Cakebread goes back to middle school. You all have known each other a long time.
He exaggerates. It was really high school, and he gets his years mixed up, but it was really high school. He had a car, and that was the wonderful joy of my life. I met Jack at a dance, the first dance of the season, and we've been dancing ever since. Had a wonderful time. We've been married now 66 years, and we still love each other.
It's obvious when you see the two of you all together. Tell us, Dolores, about how it is to work in a family business with your sons. How has that been as they have grown older and taken a leadership role here?
Well, it's been very wonderful. When you work with your family, you have ups and downs because one is really great one day and one is not so great the next, and the next is really down and out. And then that one is up on top. You know how families go. But when you're working together, you have to kind of not take too much of that to heart and smooth it over and make things work out. We all knew that we wanted to keep the winery in the family and not have any partners. So we've worked at accomplishing that. And they have their ups and downs like brothers do. But, they're working it out and it's turning out very wonderful.
What do you hope for the future of Cakebread Cellars?
Well, as owners and as entrepreneurs, it's very hard for Jack and me to give it up. And we need to face that sooner than later. But we started the winery. We have not had any partners on anything. It's been our entrepreneurship that has accomplished all this. It's just been a joy. So, we come to work happy every day. Everyone's happy. Our motto is one heartbeat from the front gate to the back gate. You're all on the same page. You all love each other. You all work together. It works.
Dolores Cakebread of Cakebread Cellars. To see pictures from the American Harvest Workshop, visit our website at wwno.org or itsneworleans.com.
Fill your heart with love today. Don't play the game of time.
That's it for this week's edition of Louisiana Eats, edible content for Louisiana food lovers. Tune in next week when we explore drug and alcohol use and abuse in the kitchen and behind the bar.
Not only do I open up just a marijuana store, I actually open up a restaurant where you sit down, you get a menu, and while you're reading the menu, somebody passes you a joint, and then we give you a free ganjanade appetizer. Ganjanade, that's olive tapenade with ganja in it.
Subscribe to our podcast, hear today's show, or catch up on previous editions anytime online at itsneworleans.com. Louisiana Eats is made possible with major support from Popeye's Louisiana Kitchen, Rouse's Markets, and Zatarain's. Additional support for Louisiana Eats is provided by the Shreveport-Bossier Convention and Tourist Bureau and Tableau, Dickie Brennan's latest restaurant serving local Creole cuisine with a view of Jackson Square. Original theme music by Johnny Sketch and the Dirty Notes. Big thanks to producers Joe Schreiner, Sarah Holtz, and Sean Johnson. Come visit us anytime in our Louisiana Eats studios at the Southern Food and Beverage Museum. I'm Poppy Tooker. Louisiana Eats is a production of WWNO and the University of New Orleans.